はい、どうも皆様、おばんです。ひよっこVtuberのひよっこVtuberの日横ヶ原れふと申します。本日は、ちょっとかねてからやりたいなと思っていた、英語の作品の、朗読をちょっとやっていきたいかなと思いますというところで、何を読もうかなっていうふうにちょっと、事前に考えたんですけれども、普通に英語の名作とかでもよかったんだけど、みんなが知ってるようなお話をそもそも読んだ方がいいかなと思いまして、あえてね、日本の作品を英訳したものをちょっと今日は読んでいこうかなと思います。はい、ハワイさんこんばんは。今日はちょっとね、いつもと違うことをやってまいります。はい。で、読ませていただく作品なんですけれども、サムネにも書いたし、あとは、説明欄のところにも書いたんですけど、俵のToda物語と、舌切り雀。で、舌切り雀の方は割と有名だと思うんだけど、この俵のToda物語っていうのが、正直僕は知らなかったんだけど、これもね、おとぎ草子とかに割と収録されているような、お話で、あるらしいです。はい。なので、もしかしたら知らないかなと思いますが、調べたらあらすじとかもね、出てくるので、ぜひぜひ、そちらの方、見ていただければと思います。はい。では、早速読んでいきましょうか。少々喉だけ潤させてもらって。その前にちょっと待ってね。ちょっとこの配信の宣伝だけ宣伝だけしていこうかな。ツイートのリンクコピーして、そうだ、方々のいろいろなちょっとディスコードにディスコードに宣伝させてもらおうと思ったけど忘れてたわ。ほい、こことこことでいいかな。よし、ここに宣伝して、はい、じゃあね、なるべくよどみなく聞きやすい声で読んでいけたらなと思うので、どうぞ、作業用 BGM などにしながら聞いていただければなと思います。ではまず、俵のToda物語の方から読ませていただきます。大丈夫かな、喉の調子。はい。では、いきます。My Lord Bag of Rice. Long, long ago, there lived in Japan a brave warrior known to all as Tawara Toda, or My Lord Bag of Rice. His true name was Fujiwara Hidesato, and there is a very interesting story of how he came to change his name. One day he sallied forth in search of adventures, for he had the nature of a warrior and could not bear to be idle. So he buckled on his two swords, took his huge bow, much taller than himself, in his hand, and slinging his quiver on his back started out. He had not gone far when he came to the bridge of Seta no Karashi, spanning one end of the beautiful Lake Biwa. No sooner had he set foot on the bridge than he saw lying right across his path a huge serpent dragon. Its body was so big that it looked like the trunk of a large pine tree, and it took up the whole width of the bridge. One of its huge claws rested on the parapet of one side of the bridge, while its tail lay right against the other. The monster seemed to be asleep, and as it breathed fire and smoke came out of its nostrils. At first, Hidesato could not help feeling alarmed at the sight of this horrible reptile lying in his path, for he must either turn back or walk right over its body. He was a brave man, however, and putting aside all fear, went forward dauntlessly. Crunch, crunch. He stepped now on the dragon's body, now between its coils, and without even one glance backward he went on his way. He had only gone a few steps when he heard someone calling him from behind. On turning back, he was much surprised to see that the monster dragon had entirely disappeared, and its place was a strange-looking man who was bowing most ceremoniously to the ground. His red hair streamed over his shoulders and was surmounted by a crown in the shape of dragon's head, and his sea-green dress was patterned with shells. Hidesato knew at once that this was no ordinary mortal, and he wondered much at the strange occurrence. Where had the dragon gone in such a short space of time? Or had it transformed itself into this man? And what did the whole thing mean? While these thoughts passed through his mind, he had come up to the man on the bridge and now addressed him. "Was it you that called me just now?" "Yes, it was I," answered the man. "I have an earnest request to make to you. Do you think you can grant it to me?" "If it is in power to do so, I will," answered Hidesato. "But first tell me who you are." "I am the Dragon King of the lake, and my home is in these waters just under this bridge." "And what is it you have to ask of me?" said Hidesato. "I want you to kill my mortal enemy, the centipede, who lives on the mountain beyond." And the Dragon King pointed to a high peak on the opposite shore of the lake. "I have lived now for many years in this lake, and I have a large family of children and grandchildren. For some time past we have lived in terror, for a monster centipede has discovered our home, and night after night it comes and carries off one of my family. I am powerless to save them. If it goes on much longer like this, not only shall I lose all my children, but I myself must fall a victim to the monster. I am, therefore, very unhappy, and in my extremity I determined to ask the help of a human being. For many days, with this intention, I have waited on the bridge in the shape of the horrible serpent dragon that you saw, in the hope that some strong, brave man would come along. But all who came this way, as soon as they saw me, were terrified and ran away as fast as they could. You are the first man I have found able to look at me without fear, so I knew at once that you were a man of great courage. I beg you to have pity upon me. Will you not help me and kill my enemy the centipede?" Hidesato felt very sorry for the Dragon King on hearing his story, and readily promised to do what he could to help him. The warrior asked where the centipede lived so that he might attack this creature at once. The Dragon King replied that its home was on the mountain Mikami, but that as it came every night at a certain hour to the palace of the lake, it would be better to wait till then. So Hidesato was conducted to the palace of the Dragon King under the bridge. Strange to say, as he followed his host downwards the waters parted to let them pass, and his clothes did not even feel damp as he passed through the flood. Never had Hidesato seen anything so beautiful as this palace, built of white marble beneath the lake. He had often heard of the Sea King's palace at the bottom of the sea, where all the servants and retainers were saltwater fishes, but here was a magnificent building in the heart of Lake Biwa. The dainty goldfishes, red carp, and silvery trout waited upon the Dragon King and his guest. Hidesato was astonished at the feast that was spread for him. The dishes were crystallized lotus leaves and flowers, and the chopsticks were of the rarest ebony. As soon as they sat down, the sliding doors opened, and 10 lovely goldfish dancers came out, and behind them followed 10 red carp musicians with the koto and the samisen. Thus, the hours flew by till midnight, and the beautiful music and dancing had banished all thoughts of the centipede. The Dragon King was about to place the warrior in a fresh cup of wine when the palace was suddenly shaken by a tramp, as if a mighty army had begun to march not far away. Hidesato and his host both rose to their feet and rushed to the balcony, and the warriors saw on the opposite mountain 2 great balls of glowing fire coming nearer and nearer. The Dragon King stood by the warrior's side, trembling with fear. The centipede! The centipede! Those 2 balls of fire are its eyes! It's coming for its prey! Now it's time to kill it! Hidesato looked where his host pointed, and, in the dim light of the starlit evening, behind the 2 balls of fire, he saw the long body of an enormous centipede winding round the mountains, and the light in its 100 feet glowed like so many distant lanterns moving slowly towards the shore. Hidesato showed not the least sign of fear. He tried to calm the Dragon King. "Don't be afraid. I shall surely kill the centipede. Just bring me my bow and arrows." The Dragon King did as he was bid, and the warrior noticed that he had only 3 arrows left in his quiver. He took the bow, and fitting an arrow to the notch, took careful aim and let fly. The arrow hit the centipede right in the middle of his head, but instead of penetrating, it glanced off harmless and fell to the ground. Nothing daunted, Hidesato took another bow, fitted it to the notch of the bow, and let fly. Again, the arrow hit the mark. It struck the centipede right in the middle of its head, only to glance off and fall to the ground. The centipede was invulnerable to weapons. When the Dragon King saw that even this brave warrior's arrows were powerless to kill the centipede, he lost heart and began to tremble with fear. The warrior saw that he had now only 1 arrow left in his quiver, and if this one failed, he could not kill the centipede. He looked across the waters. The huge reptile has wound its horrid body 7 times round the mountain and would soon come down to the lake. Nearer and nearer gleamed fireballs of eyes, and the light of its 100 feet began to throw reflections in the still water of the lake. Then suddenly, the warrior remembered that he had heard the human saliva was deadly to centipedes. But this was no ordinary centipede. This was so monstrous that even to think of such a creature made one creep with horror. Hidesato determined to try his last chance. So taking his last arrow and first putting the end of it in his mouth, he fitted the notch to his bow, took careful aim once more, and let fly. This time, the arrow again hit the centipede right in the middle of its head, but instead of glancing off harmlessly as before, it struck home to the creature's brain. Then, with a convulsive shudder, the serpentine body stopped moving, and the fiery light of its great eyes and 100 feet darkened to a dull glare like the sunset of a stormy day, and then went out in blackness. A great darkness now overspread the heavens. The thunder rolled and the lightning flashed, and the wind roared in fury, and it seemed as if the world were coming to an end. The Dragon King and his children and retainers all crouched in different parts of the palace, frightened to death, for the building was shaking to its foundation. At last, the dreadful night was over. Day dawned beautiful and clear. The centipede was gone from the mountain. Then Hidesato called the Dragon King to come out with him on the balcony, for the centipede was dead and he had nothing more to fear. Then all the inhabitants of the palace came out with joy, and Hidesato pointed to the lake. There lay the body of the dead centipede floating on the water, which was dyed red with its blood. The gratitude of the Dragon King knew no bounds. The whole family came and bowed down before the warrior, calling him their preserver and the bravest warrior in all Japan. Another feast was prepared, more sumptuous than the first. All kinds of fish, prepared in every imaginable way, raw, stewed, boiled, and roasted, served on coral trays and crystal dishes, were put before him, and the wine was the best that Hidesato had ever tasted in his life. To add to the beauty of everything, the sun shone brightly, the lake glittered like a liquid diamond, and the palace was 1,000 times more beautiful by day than by night. His host tried to persuade the warrior to stay a few days, but Hidesato insisted on going home, saying that he had now finished what he had come to do and must return. The Dragon King and his family were all very sorry to leave him so soon, but since he would go, they begged him to accept a few small presents, so they said, in token of their gratitude to him for delivering them forever from their horrible enemy, the centipede. As the warrior stood in the porch taking leave, a train of fish was suddenly transformed into a retinue of men, all wearing ceremonial robes and dragons' crowns on their heads to show that they were servants of the great Dragon King. The presents that they carried were as follows. First, a large bronze bell. Second, a bag of rice. Third, a roll of silk. Fourth, a cooking pot. Fifth, a bell. Hidesato did not want to accept this present, but as the Dragon King insisted, he could not well refuse. The Dragon King himself accompanied the warrior as far as the bridge, and then took leave of him with many bows and good wishes, leaving the procession of servants to accompany Hidesato to his house with the presents. The warrior's household and servants had been very much concerned when they found that he did not return the night before, but they finally concluded that he had been kept by the violent storm and had taken shelter somewhere. When the servants on the watch for his return caught sight of him, they called to everyone that he was approaching, and the whole household turned out to meet him, wondering much what the retinue of men bearing presents and banners that followed him could mean. As soon as the Dragon King's retainers had put down the presents, they vanished, and Hidesato told all that had happened to him. The presents which he had received from the grateful Dragon King were found to be magic power. The bell was only ordinary, and as Hidesato had no use for it, he presented it to the temple nearby, where it was hung up to boom out the hour of the day over the surrounding neighborhood. The single bag of rice, however, much was taken from the day after day for the meals of the night, and his whole family never grew less. The supply in the bag was inexhaustible. The roll of silk, too, never grew shorter, though time after time long pieces were cut off to make the warriors a new suit of cloths to go to the court in at the new year. The cooking pot was wonderful too. No matter what was put into it, it cooked deliciously whatever was wanted without any firing, truly a very economical saucepan. The fame of Hidesato's fortune spread far and wide, and as there was no need for him to spend money or rice or silk or firing, he became very rich and prosperous, and was henceforth known as My Lord of Bag Rice。 はい、以上、My Lord of Bag Rice、 なんだっけ、俵のトータ物語でした。あれだね、英語で読むの難しいね。なんかね、日本語で読むとやっぱりスラスラ内容頭に入ってくるけど、割合ね、長い文だと切れ目を読みながら探すことになるから分かりづらい。なんか日本語だったらもう慣れっこだからさ、どんだけ読んでも全然大丈夫なんだけど、割合長い文でもどこで切るとかどこに強弱つけるとかっていうのが分かりやすいんだけど、英語難しいね。すごいいい勉強に私もなっております。はい。あとちょっとね、早口で読みすぎたかな。もうちょっと次ゆっくり読もう。続きまして、その前にあれかな、軽くお話なんだけど、この俵藤太物語っていうのが、藤原の秀里って言った方がいいかな。藤原の秀里っていう、武士、お侍さん、すごく勇敢なお侍さんがいて、でそのお侍さんが旅の途中に非常に困ってる、蛇、ドラゴンキングって書いてあったけど、なんか一応竜というよりは蛇らしいね。大きい蛇、大蛇に出会って、でその大蛇がその琵琶湖に住んでるんだけど、その琵琶湖の自分の城に、夜な夜な巨大なムカデが襲ってくるから助けてほしいっていう風に、この藤原秀里に助けを求めて、その竜宮城的なね場所に招待して、おもてなしをして、でその夜に巨大な、ムカデが現れまして、でそしたらちょっとね準備の悪いことに、その藤原秀里が、矢筒に矢を3本しか持ってなくて、で最初の2本をその巨大なムカデに向かって追いかけたんだけど、どちらも全然効かなかったと。ってなった時に、その人間の唾液が非常にムカデには効果があるっていうお話をその藤原秀里が思い出して、でその矢尻を自分の唾液で濡らして、その3本目の最後の矢をムカデに追いかけたところ、それでムカデを倒すことができ、その大蛇に感謝され、で帰る時にお土産をもらって、青銅製の鐘と、ここに書いてあるね、一票のっていいのかな、多分一票の、お米と、絹かな、一巻きの絹と、なんか調理用のなんて言うんだろうお鍋かな、お鍋と、また別の鐘、ベルをもらいましたと。でベルは普通の鐘だったんだけど、その俵っていうのが魔法の俵で、どれだけ取ってもお米が減りませんよ。でその絹もどれだけ取っても布が減りませんよ。でそのお鍋もどんなものをどんな風に入れても美味しくしてくれる魔法のお鍋ですよっていう感じで、魔法アイテムをいただきましたと。でそのお米にちなんで藤原秀里さんは、俵トータっていうのが陽名なのかな、ちょっとそのあたり見るの忘れちゃったけど、それにちなんで、そういうお名前で呼ばれるようになりましたよというようなお話でしたね。Your reading was excellent, ひよこさん。Thank you! めちゃめちゃ拙かったけど。I want to read more fluently. 日本語のようにはいかないね。It was more difficult than I thought. Okay, so let's move on to the next story. ラドムキ初見です。日本語ネイティブです。お願いします。And I like to learn languages. I like to read novels. Hit me while peeking through YouTube. ラッドムギさん、初見さん、 見に来ていただいてありがとうございます。日本ネイティブ。私も日本ネイティブでございます。いろいろな言語を学んでらっしゃるんですね。ひよこはもう日本語ネイティブ、英語がまあできますよ。フランス語はちょろっとやったぐらいですね。はい。じゃあ、舌切りスズメの方は結構有名かな、お話としては。では、こちらを読んで参りましょう。なるべくちょっとゆっくり、丁寧に読むことを心がけたいと思います。ね、緊張したりすると僕、早口になっちゃう癖があるので。はい。ではまた喉を潤してこちら読んでいきたいと思います。はい、では参ります。舌切りスズメ The Tongue-Cut Sparrow. Long, long ago in Japan, there lived an old man and his wife. The old man was a good, kind-hearted, hard-working old fellow, but his wife was a regular crosspatch who spoiled the happiness of her home by her scolding tongue. She was always grumbling about something from morning to night. The old man had for a long time ceased to take any notice of her crossness. He was out most of the day at work in the fields, and as he had no child, for his amusement when he came home, he kept a tame sparrow. He loved the little bird just as much as if she has been his child. When he came back at night after his hard day's work in the open air, it was his only pleasure to pet the sparrow, to talk to her, and to teach her little tricks, which she learned very quickly. The old man would open her cage and let her fly about the room, and they would play together. Then, when supper time came, he always saved some tidbits from his meal with which to feed his little bird. Now one day, the old man went out to chop wood in the forest, and the old woman stopped at home to wash clothes. The day before, she had made some starch, and now when she came to look for it, it was all gone. The bowl which she had filled full yesterday was quite empty. While she was wondering who could have used or stolen the starch, down flew the pet sparrow, and bowing her little feathered head, a trick which she had been taught by her master, the pretty bird chirped and said, "It is I who have taken the starch. I thought it was some food put out for me in the basin, and I ate it all. If I have made a mistake, I beg you to forgive me. Tweet, tweet, tweet." You see from this that the sparrow was a truthful bird, and the old woman ought to have been willing to forgive her at once when she asked her pardon so nicely. But not so. The old woman had never loved the sparrow, and had often quarreled with her husband for keeping what she called a dirty bird about the house, saying that it only made extra work for her. Now she was only too delighted to have some cause of complaint against the pet. She scolded and even cursed the poor little bird for her bad behavior, and not content with using these harsh, unfeeling words, in a fit of rage she seized the sparrow, who all this time had spread out her wings and bowed her head before the old woman to show how sorry she was, and fetched the scissors and cut off the poor little bird's tongue. "I suppose you took my starch with that tongue. Now you may see what it is like to go without it." And with these dreadful words she drove the bird away, not caring in the least what might happen to it, and without the smallest pity for its suffering, so unkind was she. The old woman, after she had driven the sparrow away, made some more rice paste, grumbling all the time at the trouble, and after starching all her clothes, spread the things on boards to dry in the sun instead of ironing them as they do in England. In the evening, the old man came home. As usual, on the way back, he looked forward to the time when he should reach his gate and see his pet come flying and chirping to meet him, ruffling out her feathers to show her joy, and at last coming to rest on his shoulder. But tonight the old man was very disappointed, for not even the shadow of his dear Sparrow was to be seen. He quickened his steps, hastily drew off his straw sandals, and stepped onto the veranda. Still, no sparrow was to be seen. He now felt sure that his wife, in one of her cross tempers, had shut the sparrow up in his cage. So he called her and said anxiously, "Where is Suzume-san today?" The old man pretended not to know at first and answered, "Your sparrow? I'm sure I don't know. Now I come to think of it, I haven't seen her all the afternoon. I shouldn't wonder if the ungrateful bird had flown away and left you after all your petting." But at last, when the old man gave her no peace, but asked her again and again, insisting that she must know what had happened to his pet, she confessed all. She told him crossly how the sparrow had eaten the rice paste she had specially made for starching her clothes, and how when the sparrow had confessed to what she had done, in great anger she had taken her scissors and cut out her tongue, and how finally she had driven the bird away and forbidden her to return to the house again. Then the old woman showed her husband the sparrow's tongue, saying, "Here is the tongue I cut off. Horrid little bird, why did it eat all my starch?" "How could you be so cruel? Oh, how could you so cruel?" was all that the old man could answer. He was too kind-hearted to punish his beshrew of a wife, but he was terribly distressed at what had done to his poor little sparrow. 失礼しました。But he was terribly distressed at what had happened to his poor little sparrow. "What a dreadful misfortune for my poor Suzume-san to lose her tongue," he said to himself. "She won't be able to chirp any more, and surely the pain of the cutting of it in that rough way must have made her ill. Is there nothing to be done?" The old man shed many tears after his cross wife had gone to sleep. While he wiped away the tears with the sleeve of his cotton robe, a bright thought comforted him. He would go and look for the sparrow on the morrow. Having decided this, he was able to go to sleep at last. The next morning, he rose early, as soon as ever the day broke, and snatching a hasty breakfast, started out over the hills and through the woods, stopping at every clump of bamboos to cry, "Where, oh where does my tongue-cut sparrow stay? Where, oh where does my tongue-cut sparrow stay?" He never stopped to rest for his noonday meal, and it was far on in the afternoon when he found himself near a large bamboo wood. Bamboo groves are the favorite haunts of sparrows, and there sure enough at the edge of the wood he saw his own dear sparrow waiting to welcome him. He could hardly believe his eyes for joy, and ran forward quickly to greet her. She bowed her little head and went through a number of the tricks her master had taught her, to show her pleasure at seeing her old friend again, and, wonderful to relate, she could talk as of old. The old man told her how sorry he was for all that had happened, and inquired after her tongue, wondering how she could speak so well without it. Then the sparrow opened her beak and showed him that a new tongue has grown in place of the old one, and begged him not to think any more about the past, for she was quite well now. Then the old man knew that his sparrow was a fairy and no common bird. It would be difficult to exaggerate the old man's rejoicing now. He forgot all his troubles. He forgot even how tired he was, for he had found his lost sparrow, and instead of being ill and without a tongue as he had feared and expected to find her, she was well and happy with a new tongue, and without a sign of the ill treatment she had received from his wife. And above all, she was a fairy. The sparrow asked him to follow her, and flying before him, she led him to a beautiful house in the heart of the bamboo grove. The old man was utterly astonished when he entered the house to find what a beautiful place it was. It was built of the whitest wood, the soft cream-colored mats which took the place of carpets were the finest he had ever seen, and the cushions that the sparrow brought out for him to sit ごめんなさい難しいなAnd the cushions that the sparrow brought out for him to sit on were made of the finest silk and crepe. Beautiful vases and lacquer boxes adorned the kotonoma of every room. The sparrow led the old man to the place of honor, and then, taking her place at a humble distance, she thanked him with many polite bows for all the kindness he had shown her for many long years. The lady sparrow, as we will now call her, introduced all of her families to the old man. This done, her daughters, robed in dainty cape gowns, brought in on beautiful old-fashioned trays a feast of all kinds of delicious foods, till the old man began to think he must be dreaming. In the middle of the dinner, some of the sparrow's daughters performed a wonderful dance called the Suzume Odori, or the sparrow's dance, to amuse the guest. Never had the old man enjoyed himself so much. The hours flew by too quickly in this lovely spot, with all these fairy sparrows to wait upon him, to feast him, and to dance before him. But the night came on, and the darkness reminded him that he had a long way to go and must think about taking his leave and return home. He thanked his kind hostess for her splendid entertainment, and begged her for his sake to forget all she had suffered at the hands of his cross old wife. He told the lady sparrow that it was a great comfort and happiness to him to find her in such a beautiful home, and to know that she wanted for nothing. It was his anxiety to know how she fared and what had really happened to her that had led him to seek her. Now he knew that all was well. He could return home with a light heart. If ever she wanted him for anything, she had only to send for him, and he would come at once. The lady sparrow begged him to stay and rest several days and enjoy the change, but the old man said he must return to his old wife, who would probably be cross at his not coming home. who would probably be cross at his not coming home at the usual time, and to his work, and therefore, much as he wished to do so, he could not accept her kind invitation. But now that he knew where the lady sparrow lived, he would come to see her whenever he had time. ちょっと待って、一度飲み物を。When the lady sparrow saw that she could not persuade the old man to stay longer, she gave an order to some of her servants, and they at once brought in 2 boxes, one large and the other small. These were placed before the old man, and the Lady Sparrow asked him to choose whichever he liked for a present which she wished to give him. The old man could not refuse this kind proposal, and he chose a smaller box, saying, "I am too old and feeble to carry the big and heavy box. As you are so kind as to say that I may take whichever I like, I will choose a small one, which will be easier for me to carry." Then the sparrows all helped him put it on his back and went to the gate to see him off, bidding him goodbye with many bows and entreating him to come again whenever he had the time. Thus the old man and his pet sparrow separated quite happily, the sparrow showing not the least ill will for all the kindness she had suffered for all the unkindness she had suffered at the hands of the old wife. Indeed, she only felt sorrow for the old man who had to put up with it all his life. When the old man reached home, he found his wife even crosser than usual, for it was late on in the night, and she had been waiting up for him for a long time. "Where have you been all this time?" she asked in a big voice. "Why do you come back so late?" The old man tried to pacify her by showing her the box of presents he had brought back with him, and then he told her of all that had happened to him, and how wonderfully he had been entertained at the sparrow's house. Now let us see what is in the box," said the old man, not giving her time to grumble again. "You must help me open it." And they both sat down before the box and opened it. To their utter astonishment, they found the box filled to the brim with gold and silver coins and many other precious things. The mats of their little cottage fairly glittered as they took out the things one by one, and put them down and handled them over and over again. The old man was overjoyed at the sight of the riches that were now his. Beyond his brightest expectations was the sparrow's gift, which would enable him to give up work and live in ease and comfort the rest of his days. He said, "Thanks to my good little sparrow! Thanks to my good little sparrow!" many times. But the old woman, after the first moments of surprise and satisfaction at the sight of the gold and silver were over, could not suppress the greed of her wicked nature. She now began to reproach the old man for not having brought home the big box of presents, for in the innocence of his heart he had told her how he had refused the large box of presents which the sparrows had offered him, preferring the smaller one because it was light and easy to carry home. "You silly old man," said she. "Why did you not bring the large box? Just think what we have lost. We might have had twice as much silver and gold as this. You are certainly an old fool," she screamed, and then went to bed as angry as she could be. The old man now wished that he had said nothing about the big box, but it was too late. The greedy old woman, not contented with the good luck which had so unexpectedly befallen them, and which was so little deserved, made up her mind, if possible, to get more. Early the next morning she got up and made the old man describe the way to the sparrow's house. When he saw what was in her mind, he tried to keep her from going, but it was useless. She would not listen to one word he said. It is strange that the old woman did not feel ashamed of going to see the sparrow after the cruel way she had treated her in cutting off her tongue in a fit of rage. But her creed to getting the big box made her forget everything else. It did not even enter her thoughts that the sparrows might be angry with her, as indeed they were, and might punish her for what she had done. Ever since the Lady Sparrow had returned home in the sad plight which they had first found her, weeping and bleeding from the mouth, her whole family and her whole family and relations had done little else but speak of the cruelty of the old woman. How could she, they asked each other, inflict such a heavy punishment for such a trifling offense as that of eating some rice paste by mistake? They all loved the old man who was so kind and good and patient under all his troubles, but the old woman they hated, and they determined, if ever they had the chance, to punish her as she deserved. They had not long to wait. After walking for some hours, the old woman had at last found the bamboo grove which she had made her husband carefully describe, and now she stood before it crying out, "Where is the tongue-cut sparrow's house? Where is the tongue-cut sparrow's house?" At last she saw the eaves of the house peeping out from against the bamboo foliage. She hastened to the door and knocked loudly. When the servants told the Lady Sparrow that her old mistress was at the door asking to see her, she was somewhat surprised at the unexpected visit, after all that had taken place, and she wondered not a little at the boldness of the old woman in venturing to come to the house. The Lady Sparrow, however, was a polite bird, and so she went out to greet the old woman, remembering that she had once been her mistress. The old woman intended, however, to waste no time in words. She went right to the point, without the least shame, and said, "You need no trouble to entertain me as you did my old man. I have come myself to get the box which he so stupidly left behind. I shall soon take my leave if you will give me the big box. That is all I want." The Lady Sparrow at once consented and told her servants to bring out the big box. The old woman eagerly seized it and hoisted it on her back, and without even stopping to thank the Lady Sparrow, began to hurry homewards. The box was so heavy that she could not walk fast, much less run, as she would have liked to do. So anxious was she to get home and see what was inside the box, but she had often to sit down and rest herself by the way. While she was staggering along under the heavy load, her desire to open the box became too great to be resisted. She could wait no longer, for she supposed this big box to be full of gold and silver and precious jewels like the smaller one her husband had received. At last this greedy and selfish old woman put down the box by the wayside and opened it carefully, expecting to gloat her eyes on a mine of wealth. What she saw, however, so terrified her that she nearly lost her senses. As soon as she lifted the lid, a number of horrible and frightened-looking demons bounced out of the box and surrounded her as if they intended to kill her. Not even in nightmares had she ever seen such so horrible creatures as her much coveted box contained. A demon with one huge eye right in the middle of its forehead came and glared at her. Monsters with gaping mouths looked as if they would devour her. A huge snake coiled and hissed about her, and a big frog hopped and croaked towards her. The old woman had never been frightened in her life, and ran from the spot as fast as her quaking legs would carry her, glad to escape alive. When she reached home, she fell to the floor and told her husband with tears all that had happened to her, and how she had been nearly killed by the demons in the box. Then she began to blame the sparrow, but the old man stopped her at once, saying, "Don't blame the sparrow. It's your wickedness which has at last met with its reward. I only hope this may be a lesson to you in the future." The old woman said nothing more, and from that day she repented of her cross, unkind ways, and by degrees became a good old woman, so that her husband hardly knew her. 失礼。やばい。ちょっと読み直します。はい。The old woman said nothing more, and from that day she repented of her cross, unkind ways, and by degrees became a good old woman, so that her husband hardly knew her to be the same person, and they spent their last days together happily, free from want or care, spending carefully the treasure the old man had received from his pet, the tongue-cut sparrow. はい、以上、舌切りスズメ The tongue-cut sparrow でした。やばい、最後めちゃカミカミになったんだけど難しい。舌切りスズメってさ、途中読んでて思ったのが、なんかこのスズメは妖精でしたっていう一節が出てきたんだけど、もともとそうだったっけでしたっけ。なんかそこをちょっと調べていい？舌切りスズメのさ、舌切りスズメあらすじ、ちょっとあらすじサクッとまとめてみた。スズメはチュンって名前を付けられてるんだ。スズメのチュンがおばあさんのこしらえた洗濯のりを間違って食べてしまって、で舌を切られてしまうっていうところはまあ一致してるけど、その先はでまあおじいさんがスズメを探しに行って、なんかあれなんだね、その牛洗いとか馬洗いの人に行方を聞くところは省略されてるんだ。でそのスズメがなんかそのスズメのお姫様だったことは書かれてるけど、妖精だったっていうことはやっぱ書いてないから、ここ結構あれだね、役者の翻訳した方のオリジナリティが、これがね一応1908年とかだったかな。このプリフェイスに書いてあるんだけど、このね1908年、役者の方がですね、どこに書いてあったっけ、イェイ・テオドラ・オザキって人なんですけれども、この人の若干オリジナリティが入ってるね。スズメのお姫様じゃなくって、スズメの妖精っていうことになってて、あとちょっと面白かったのが、どこだったっけ、多分イギリスで出版されたんだろうね、この本が。お洗濯のね、方法について、この一節。ちょっと待ってね。あれだね、スズメの舌を切って逃がしちゃった後の一節なんだけど、また海苔をこしらえて、ブツブツね、文句を言いながら、服に、海苔をつけて、ちょっと待ってね、板の上に、太陽光で乾かすために、板の上に広げました。で、この後、ここInstead of ironing them as they do in England。イングランドはもうこの時代というか1900年代だから、お洗濯をしたらアイロンをねかけるっていうことが書いてあるけど、 なんかそこちょっと日本とここ文化違いますよ。日本はね、天日干しの割と文化だから、イギリスはあれかな、多分。なんかイメージだけど、イギリスって結構雨とか曇りの日が多いイメージだから、あんま天日干しとかそんなしないんだろうね。しないんだろうねっていうか知った口聞いちゃうけど、どうなんでしょう。イギリス有識者の方知ってたらお願いします。まあでもここにね、そういう風にちょっと若干補足説明が入ってたり、僕読み飛ばしたけど、トコノーマーっていうのが書いてあったり、and alcove where precious objects are displayed。だから、alcove ってなんだろう、あんま聞き馴染みのない言葉だな。一段上がってるとこみたいな意味かな。アルコーブ。まあまあまあまあまあ。日本語に訳した時の床の間になってるな。まあ、壁がちょっと一部へこんだ場所って感じかな。そう。っていう風にちゃんと説明がなされてるのが面白いよね。この訳文ならではだよね。で、まあ最後はね、強欲なおばあさんが大きい方のつづらをもらって帰って、中から妖怪がたくさん出てきて、そっか、でもなんか僕もその妖怪が出てきたところまでは覚えてるけど、まあ、命からがら逃げ出して心を入れ替えて優しくなりましたっていうこのオチはちょっとあんま覚えてなかったな。こうやって読んでみると結構ね新しい発見があったりなんかして、意外と訳文で自分の知ってる物語を読むっていうのもなかなかおつなものですねはい、というわけで今日は一応ねこの2つを予定してて、予定というかまあ読むつもりだったので、はい、ちょっとかなりねやっぱ自分的に結構しどろもどろになっちゃったり、カミカミになっちゃったりしちゃったのが結構あれ心残りっていうか、あれだからまたちょっとね次読むときはもうちょい練習重ねるかなって感じかな。一応ね一通り目は通した。あ、違うわ、こっちだ。この俵の淘汰物語の方は一通りちょっとざっと目は通して読んだからめちゃめちゃ噛んだってところはなかったんだけど、事前準備足らなくて、舌切り雀の方が途中までしか僕下読みができてなかったから、もう後半の方ぶっつけていっちゃったからめちゃめちゃカミカミになっちゃった。やっぱ切る場所難しいねこれ。あ、ちょっとコメント見るの忘れてた。ちょっと待ってね。じゃあ、prends le français plus tôt ちょっと待って。でも僕フランス語ね、もう何年もやってないからね、全くわかんない。Je prends le français plus tôt de enchanté à nouveau。読み方合ってんのかな。僕今すごい雰囲気で読んだけど。ちょっとあれ、日仏翻訳にかけよう。あ、違う、俺さっきかけたわ。話しながらやったから忘れてた。やば。私はフランス語をもっと一生懸命、なるほどね。僕はちょっともうフランス語は門外漢になってしまったので本当に長らくやってない。では、フランス語お勉強頑張ってください。IDK って何の略でしたっけ？ IDK I don't know IDK すごいね、さっき完全に無意識で I don't know か。I didn't know the plot of Tonka Sparrow, but I didn't know it's a kind of freaking thriller from the last part。舌切り雀のプロットI didn't know, but 知ってたってことなのかな。舌切り雀の話の流れは知ってたけど、後半が なんか怪談話みたいなのは知らなかったよって感じかな。後半は怪談話というか割と正統派の完全懲悪者みたいな感じではありますね。家族ともども聞いてましたわよ。お恥ずかしい。あんなしどろもどろなたどたどしい英語を聞かれてしまった。The one-eyed monster shivered me. Anyhow, well done, Hiyoko. Thank you. 一つ目のお化けって割とでもあれだよね、世界中でメジャーだよね。日本にも一つ目小僧とかカラカサお化けもなんか一つ目の印象だし、海外で言ってもサイクロプスとかそういう一つ目のお化けいるし、やっぱそういう単眼のお化けっていうのは古今東西どこに行っても恐れられるもんなんやな。Nice reading, thank you. Thank you. もうちょっと良くなります。次回多分ねまたやるかな。ちゃんと僕英語を読めるように読み書きできるようになりたいので、もうちょっとちゃんと、次回やるときは The Story of Urashima Taro, the Fisher Lad というわけで、浦島太郎、こちらもみんなよくご存知のお話であると思います。浦島太郎と、The Farmer and the Badger、 これ何？農家とBadger って何だったっけ？タヌキあれか？なんだっけの、ちょっと待ってね。タヌキって言ったらでも違うか、カチカチ山ではないか。なんなんだろう。いや、カチカチ山だ。なんかウサギ出てきてるわ。はい。では次回は、浦島太郎とカチカチ山をお送りいたします。はい。どっちもね、結構有名なお話なので、皆さんご存知だとは思いますが、はい。では、また次回、こちらの、今日なんてタイトルにしたっけ？朗読会、日本の昔話を英語で読んでみよう第2回でお会いしましょう。というところで、本日見に来てくださった方、コメントしてくださった方、ありがとうございました。また高評価、チャンネル登録などしていただけると嬉しいかなと思います。それではこれにて失礼いたします。ひよこがはらでした。バイバイ。Thank you. See you next time.